24-year-old Sydney Irene Loofe was excited about her second date with her dream girl Audrey on November 15, 2017. Her heart was in her throat as she sent a Snapchat to her friends dressed up and beaming with joy. Ecstatic, she climbed into Audrey's car ready for the night out. She'd never come home alive again. This is a complex situation, full of crazy and full of fraud. Poor Sydney didn't know what she was stepping into. To her, she was connecting with someone. She was at the beginning of a relationship full of butterflies and hope. We've all been there before. Keep in mind this story is about Sydney Loofe. We keep telling these stories so we can learn from them, so we can keep the lovely people in our memories and we don't let their stories fade away. Sydney was one of a kind. She was born to George and Susie Loofe in Broken Bow, Nebraska, on August 21, 1993. She had a big brother, Levi, and a little sister, Mackenzie. Growing up, Sydney was a major tomboy. She loved to bike with her friends and her big brother. She wanted to do everything her big brother did. Her dad and her big brother Levi would often go on fishing trips. As she got older, she begged to join them on these trips. Her dad gave in and she instantly fell in love with fishing. At the beginning of high school, Sydney played on the basketball team. Her dad was her coach, which she loved. She was also an avid and talented golfer. Unfortunately, her love for sports would have to take a back seat because she started to have severe, unmanageable back pain. She ended up diagnosed with scoliosis. She was in too much pain to continue to play sports. She graduated from Neligh Oakdale High School in 2011, where her dad wasn't just the coach, he was the principal. For most teenagers, this would be horrifying, but for Sydney, it was comforting. Eventually, she moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, and adopted a cat by the name of Mimsy. She adored her cat. Sydney worked as a cashier at Menards and went to work every day with a smile on her face. She was known by co-workers as bubbly and a hard worker. Her friends and family described her as kind and compassionate. She went above and beyond for others and always rooted for the underdogs. Despite her struggle with depression and anxiety, she didn't let it keep her in its dark depths. She dreamed of moving to Colorado and working at a vet clinic. She was full of hope for the future. Her brother told the Journal-Star, Sydney was the poster person for caring more about others than she did herself. On numerous occasions, she took in friends and co-workers who were struggling in life. She gave them a roof over their heads and helped them save up so they could care for themselves. She was a warm and loving woman, and she should have never been taken from this world, and not in the way that she was. Sydney was ready for some romance in life, so, like most of our generation, she turned to online dating. On Tinder, she met a girl by the name of Audrey. They clicked right away. After a few days of chatting, they decided to go on a date. On November 14, 2017, Audrey picked Sydney up. They drove around and smoked some weed, but Sydney had to work in the morning, so the date didn't last long. They decided to meet up again after she got off work the next day. Sydney was glowing after her date and even told a few of her friends that she had met her dream girl. So the night of November 15th, Audrey picked Sydney up once again. Little did Sydney know that her dream girl was a devil in disguise. On November 16th, her friends and family started to worry. No one had heard from Sydney since the Snapchat she sent out the night before her second date. And she never showed up to work that morning. She never missed work without notice to her employer. Her mother, living in Neligh with her father, drove to Lincoln to check on her. Her car was parked at the apartment complex, but she wasn't home. The biggest red flag was that Mimsy was out of food. Sydney loved her cat. Her cat was her child, and she took the responsibility of taking care of Mimsy seriously. She'd never leave her Mimsy without food and water. Scared, her mother reported her missing that very day. The police tried tracing her phone, and the last time it pinged had been outside of Wilbur, Nebraska the night before. Neely and Lincoln were supportive of the hunt for Sydney. When the news spread that Sydney was missing, people were tying green ribbons on their trees and mailboxes. There were green ribbons everywhere. One of Sydney's friends had a brilliant idea. I give her major kudos for what she did to help find Sydney, because this is amazing. This friend knew that Sydney had gone on a date the night before with a girl named Audrey. So she made a fake Tinder profile and made sure she matched with Audrey. She chatted with her and got her phone number. She immediately turned the information into the police. Tracing the number, the police discovered that Audrey wasn't real. The number belonged to a 23-year-old by the name of Bailey Boswell. She lived in Wilbur, Nebraska with her 51-year-old boyfriend, Aubrey Trail. We're going to dig into both of these characters' past. There's a lot to unpack with Bailey, but I couldn't find much information on Aubrey. Bailey Boswell grew up in Leon, Iowa. I'm a bit familiar with Leon. When I was younger, my grandma had a home there, and my grandpa, her husband, was in the nursing home with Alzheimer's. It's not far from where I live now. Leon's a small town. It's even smaller than where I live. It has a population of a little under 2,000 people. It's one of those towns where everyone knows everyone and everyone knows everyone's business. Growing up, Bailey was popular and athletic. In high school, she was known as a phenomenal basketball player. She also was listed as a member of the fastest 200-meter relay team in Central Decatur Community Schools history. In 2012, Bailey graduated from high school. According to friends, this is when things went downhill for her. She started hanging out with the bad crowd and getting into drugs and trouble. Not long later, Bailey moved to Missouri. She started dating a former high school football player, Big Shot. Together, they had a child. However, this small family didn't last long. In 2016, Bailey filed a protection order against her boyfriend. Not long after, she was arrested for possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia in Lincoln, Nebraska. She never showed up to her court date. I'm not sure if it was after the protection order or the arrest in Lincoln, but Bailey's child went to live with her parents. Aubrey has an extensive history in the criminal system. He's been in prison twice in the state of Nebraska for bad checks. He was also charged for theft in the third degree in Iowa in 1999. This is just to name a few offenses. There have been several incidences with the police involving theft and fraud. However, there had never been any violent or sexual charges against Aubrey. Once the media had announced that the couple were persons of interest, they posted a very strange video on Facebook claiming they were innocent.
Good morning, Lincoln and Omaha and probably several other places. This is Aubrey Trail and this is Bailey Boswell. I guess y'all also know her as Audrey. But we spent the last few days watching ourselves being slammed and crucified in the newspapers and the news and everything else, so we thought it was time we had our say. We're not trying to defend anything. We're not trying to make you believe anything. We just feel we should get to say our side since everyone else gets to say theirs. Unlike the Lincoln Police Department and Saline County Police Department and all those folks, everything we're going to tell you, you're going to be able to pick up the phone or have a newspaper pick up the phone and very easily verify it. I am going to talk for a minute, then Bailey here is going to tell you about her 2 dates with Sydney, and we'll go from there. The Lincoln Police Department apparently wants everyone to believe that we're hiding, that we haven't talked to them, that we're avoiding them. Actually, we've spoken to the Lincoln Police Department a couple of times. We also, through my attorney, Doug Mertz in Falls City, Nebraska, please verify, we both wrote long statements and sent to the Lincoln Police Department telling them everything we know. We also, the day before Thanksgiving, which would be the 22nd, we repeatedly called the Lincoln Police Department when they were trying to contact us. After about 10 phone calls, please have a newspaper, ask for they record everything. We were told to quit blowing up their phone, even though we told them, hey, do you understand that we're the people you're looking for? They said, you've called here several times. We will get back to you when we can. So that's how that went. They're telling you that they have all these leads, that Sydney was last seen in Wilbur and such. What they're not telling you is that we are the two people who gave them all these leads. I called the Falls City Police Department because they went to my ex's house and looking for me, so I called to find out what was going on. Apparently they did not know my address in Wilbur. They thought I still lived in Falls City. I talked to the sergeant there. I told him what my address was in Wilbur. That night they went to my house and searched our house. We found out that on the 21st, I think it was, or the 20th, the county attorney in Wilbur, Saline County, filed a warrant against me for possession of a firearm, which is insane. I have never owned a firearm in 20 years. The next day, according to the papers, the warrant was withdrawn, but the Lincoln paper is not telling you that the warrant was withdrawn because there was no firearm in my house. But they will have you believe that. Several other things. I guess the FBI and the U.S. Marshals and all that good stuff, and a lot of other people with a lot of initials that I have no idea what means, is investigating, looking for us or whatever. We were at our house 4 days ago. No one showed up. We were in Wilbur. We've been to Wilbur twice. We have a young lady with us for a week, which is Bailey's sometimes girlfriend. The Omaha police started calling her phone, telling her pretty much that she's in danger with us. So we took her home the day before Thanksgiving. She was with us when Bailey and I were trying to call the Lincoln Police Department. She can verify this. If you want her name, I guess friend us and message us on Facebook, because as we know stuff, you will know stuff, because we're not cutting, editing, or anything. If we make a slip on this video and say something that you find incriminating, please let us know. And you've already crucified us in the newspapers. You've already crucified us on Facebook. In America, I sure thought it was a trial first, but I guess not. You've heard all of this stuff about my criminal history. All true. Been convicted of bad checks and forgery and all that good stuff, but never been convicted of anything like, I guess I'm a person of interest on now. And oh yeah, the Lincoln Police Department failed to tell you that me and Bailey do about $100,000 a year business in antiques on eBay, the antique malls in Lincoln, Omaha, all this stuff. They will have you believe that I'm still just a criminal running around. But I don't really need to explain all of that, because as far as I know, I'm not wanted for anything. I'm a person of interest, and I'm not really running from anything. I mean, naturally, I can't go home now because my house has been swarmed, searched, and I'm being looked for. But, and I assume that I have a warrant out of state somewhere now, so that kind of cancels that out. So this has pretty much cost me my life, and I appreciate that from the Lincoln Police Department and the FBI and all those other agencies. But I pray for Sydney. I hope she's found soon. I wish the family the best. I'm sorry that she wasn't with you on Thanksgiving. And that's pretty much all I can say for now. Here's Bailey to tell you whatever she wants to. I'm fixing to step aside and get out of this. Thank you for listening.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bailey, Audrey on Tinder, and a few other names because I have warrants, but this really isn't about me. This is about Sydney, and I'm just kind of want to tell you what I've already told the Lincoln police more than one time. I met her on a Tuesday. We drove around Lincoln, smoked weed, had a great time. We hit it off. I dropped her off at home, picked her up the next night at her house. We drove around, smoked weed again, made our way to my house where we smoked wax and shatter, and I gave her a 1/4 ounce of some really good weed. I went to take her home, and she asked me to drop her off at a friend's house, so I did so. I gave her my number. We were planning to go to the casino that weekend. I haven't heard from her since. I really don't even know what else to say. I've been seeing all this stuff on the news presses and the magazines and the news, and I guess I just want the family to know that I'm truly sorry and I didn't have anything to do with this, and I hope that Sydney is found very soon. She is a sweet, amazing girl. I don't know. Babe, do you have anything else to say?
I hope also that Sydney's found soon. We wish the family the best. We're sorry you're going through this. As far as all this stuff that the police department is putting in the papers, putting on the news, what they're feeding to the media, what they want the media to know, there's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing she can do about that, because the police department is going to do what suits them best. Yeah, I know that's coming from a criminal, so you'll believe what you will as far as the police department is concerned. But as far as I'm concerned, what they're chasing us around like dogs, I wish the family the best. I mean, no disrespect to anyone. I wish Sydney the best. But as far as the police department, you.
Yeah.
In this strange video, Bailey claims that on the second date, she and Sydney drove around smoking. They ended up back at Bailey's place to smoke wax. Eventually, Sydney asked to be dropped off at a friend's. That was the last time she saw or heard from her. The entire video, Bailey had on dark sunglasses and her hood was up. She never moved when Aubrey spoke. It just gave me a really uneasy feeling. On November 17th, with the couple nowhere in sight, the police searched their apartment. For the most part, the basement apartment looked normal and tidy. Still, there were huge red flags. The apartment reeked of bleach, and the landlord reported that she could smell the bleach on the day that Sydney was reported missing. The walls were wiped down in certain areas. Strangely, the landlord also found that the air conditioner coil was frozen. This often happens if an air conditioner is too low for too long. I'm not sure when they discovered the surveillance footage, but there was some pretty telling footage from November the 15th, before the second date between Bailey and Sydney. The footage was taken at the same Menards Sydney worked at, and she happened to be working when all this went down. Both Bailey and Aubrey went to this exact Menards to buy a hacksaw and other very suspicious tools. I think Sydney may have been on break because she had been outside for most of this. At one point she walks back in and Aubrey follows her into the store. She even looks up from her phone and sees him. Of course, she had no idea who he was. He was just another customer to her. On November 30th, the couple was found and arrested outside of Branson, Missouri. From what I understand, the police didn't have enough evidence to charge the two of them with murder. However, both of them had warrants out for their arrest. Bailey had never shown up for her court date after being caught with weed. I believe they also had warrants involving a scam in Pennsylvania and Kansas. Keep in mind this is from what I understand. The timeline could be a bit wrong because it was a bit messy in all the articles and TV clips I went through. I'm telling Sydney's story to the best of my abilities. If I ever state something incorrectly, just drop me a respectful comment with the correction and I'll pin your comment. Anyway, Bailey and Aubrey like to tell people they ran an antique and eBay business. In reality, they were scammers and thieves. In Pennsylvania, the two of them had dressed up and put on an act as a rich daughter and her father. Keeping this act up, they attended an antique auction. They purchased $28,000 in gold and silver coins with a bad check. This was just one of the fraud charges against them at the time. These two are indescribable. On December 4th, Sydney's family got the answer they feared. They received an answer for her disappearance that would break their hearts and leave an empty hole of grieving they'll have to deal with the rest of their lives. It all started when a patrol officer came across a garbage bag with an arm sticking out of it. He had been driving by a cornfield in Clay County, Nebraska. Through December 4th and December 5th, several garbage bags were discovered. Each bag had a piece of a dismembered body part. The same sheets found in Bailey and Aubrey's apartment were found with the body parts. The body was identified as Sydney Loofe through her tattoos. She was never coming home to her family and her loved ones alive. After her body was found, over 100 people held a candlelight vigil at Lincoln's sunken garden in honor of her. Nebraska has made sure that Sydney Loofe is never forgotten. Her co-workers at Menards raised money to purchase a plaque. This plaque with her name was placed on a bench at one of her favorite places, the Henry Porley Zoo. Others donated money to her family so they could purchase 2 more benches at the zoo in her honor. Not only that, but the Ponca tribe of Nebraska went out of their way to build a bench in her honor by the Elkhorn River. The Set Me Free Project created a $3,000 scholarship for a Nebraska student in Sydney's name. The Set Me Free Project is known for its work in fighting human trafficking and promoting social media safety. There's no doubt Sydney Loofe was loved and admired by anyone who came across her. Her presence changed everyone's lives who had the chance to meet her. Doing all this research, I wish I had gotten a chance to know her myself. Of course, an autopsy of Sydney's body was done. The conclusion to the autopsy was horrifying. Sydney had died from strangulation. It was considered a homicide right away. Her body had been cut into 14 pieces before being thrown into the garbage bags and dropped off in the middle of nowhere. There was evidence of a struggle and that Sydney put up a fight against her killers. Her earlobe was torn and she had marks around her wrists that the pathologist believed was from being restrained. There were marks on her bones consistent with being dismembered with a hacksaw. The scariest part is that she had complete organs missing from her body, including her heart. I believe it was after the police found her body that Bailey and Aubrey were charged with first-degree murder. I'm not quite sure if they've been sentenced for the Pennsylvania scam, but in August of 2018, the couple was sentenced to prison for scamming a Kansas couple of their savings of $400,000. Bailey was sentenced to 5 years in prison for this offense, and Aubrey was sentenced to 10 years. One peculiar fact about the Kansas case was that during court, Bailey's defense lawyer claimed that something traumatizing and life-changing happened to Bailey in her first year of college. She wouldn't release any specific details, but this was the reason Bailey had turned to drugs and criminal behavior. Aubrey had loose lips, but he was loyal to Bailey. Throughout it all, he denied that Bailey had anything to do with the murder of Sydney. This is when the strangest things started to be revealed in the case. During an FBI interrogation, Aubrey told investigators that, "I don't believe in the God you believe in." He then claimed he drained the blood and soul from Sydney because it was part of his religion. Aubrey's first story was that Sydney was low on cash, so she agreed to join in on his sexual fantasy for $5,000. His fantasy involved Sydney and 2 other girls. He liked to get rough in bed, and he accidentally strangled Sydney to death with a cord. As the story went, Bailey was in the living room the entire time smoking weed. She had nothing to do with Sydney's death. She only helped get rid of the body. Aubrey's trial was chaotic to say the least. He pled guilty to improper disposal of skeletal remains, but not guilty to first-degree murder. One day, as a witness was going to the stand to testify, Aubrey pulled out a makeshift knife and stabbed himself in the neck. He screamed, "Bailey is innocent and I curse you all." "I'm not kidding you." That's what he proclaimed as he tried to commit suicide. "I couldn't make this up if I tried." Aubrey survived this dramatic attempt at suicide after being rushed to the emergency room. No one was sure where he received the makeshift knife. He missed a few days of court due to healing, and when he came back, the judge ordered that he wear handcuffs for the rest of his trial. The testimonies from the witnesses were even more appalling. 3 women testified against Aubrey and had quite a story for the court. All 3 women testified as anonymous witnesses to protect their identity from the media. Each woman had met Bailey by matching with her on Tinder. Not long after meeting, they were all introduced to Aubrey. Bailey referred to Aubrey as the sugar daddy when she introduced them. Aubrey gave all the women an allowance of $200 a week. He would shower them with gifts to butter them up. Aubrey and Bailey eventually introduced them to their group, which included 12 other women. Aubrey was a 500-year-old vampire, and the women were all witches. They were a coven of evil, and they were what society considers a cult. The girls had strict rules they had to abide by. Some of these rules included calling Aubrey Daddy and Bailey Mommy. Bailey was also considered the Queen Witch. The girls had to obey the couple's every whim. They weren't allowed to wear clothing in the apartment. They were expected to have group sex together and with the couple. They were also expected to help the 2 steal antiques and scam people. If they didn't obey the rules, there were punishments, which included getting whipped. During their time with the couple, they claimed the 2 frequently talked about their desire to kill and claimed that if they killed someone, they'd gain powers. Aubrey also got major enjoyment out of inflicting pain on the women. There was a claim that he had what he referred to as a kill bag in the apartment. One of these women was the woman that was spotted on surveillance footage with Bailey and Aubrey at the casino. She claimed they expected her to kill someone in Kearney, Nebraska, but plans had changed. Many of the women left the group because they were scared and they weren't going to cross the line into murder. As they left the cult, they were threatened and told if they opened their mouths about the group, the couple would harm them and their family members. After all the testimonies, the surveillance footage of the 2 at Menards, and Aubrey's behavior, he was found guilty of murder in the first degree and guilty of conspiracy to murder in the first degree in July of 2019. Aubrey is up for the death penalty. His court date for his sentencing is scheduled June 23rd to the 26th of this year, 2020. Bailey's trial has been moved to Lexington, Nebraska. This was decided by the judge. I'm guessing this is due to the media coverage on the case, but it's still in Nebraska, so I'm sure it's going to be difficult to find unbiased jurors. Media coverage during the trial has been denied by the judge, so there will be no media in the courtroom. Her trial was originally scheduled for October of 2019, but it's been moved to March of 2020. I will notify you guys of the updates on the cases as they happen. Fingers crossed that Aubrey gets the death penalty and Bailey is found guilty. All the evidence is there. God, this story is one heck of a mess. What they did to Sydney is beyond unforgivable. This wasn't a normal murder either. They planned it out and had the tools ready. Bailey fooled Sydney into believing she was connecting with her. It just breaks my heart. I get emotional over these stories, and I think the ones that are closer to home hit me harder. One of Sydney's tattoos on the inside of her arm said, "Everything will be wonderful someday." As soon as I read the quote, I recognized it as Everclear lyrics from their song Wonderful. Everclear is one of my favorite bands, so I'm going to leave you with a line from the song. Promises mean everything when you're little and the world's so big. I just don't understand how you can smile with all those tears in your eyes and tell me everything is wonderful now.